We are so glad you joined us today to get centered, but we have a disclaimer. Being centered really is more of an aspiration than a destination. This is a vodcast where we'll be discussing all things mind and body, mental health, physical well-being, parenting, marriage, healthy touch, anger and how to handle it. What is integrative medicine? How do I meditate? What are we learning from COVID in this quarantine experience? Where do we go from here? You have questions on these topics, and we ask those same questions ourselves. So this isn't a vodcast full of answers. It's one full of discussion, because we're going to tell you right now we do not have all the answers, but we do love a rich discussion and hope you do too. We're Leila Scott and John Price, the founders of the Center for Healing Arts and Sciences, and this vodcast is hosted by our amazing team, which is comprised of an integrative group of therapists offering individual, couples, family, depth therapy, and offers support groups for men, women, teens, young professionals, and others. Chinese medicine practitioners offering acupuncture, herbal medicine, food therapy, lifestyle advice, and last but not least, our mindfulness meditation and spirituality guide. Be sure to reach out to us to let us know other topics you'd like to hear us discuss, or to let us know if you'd like to work with our integrative team. We are here for you and offering virtual care as well as home delivery of wellness self-care packages during this time of physical separation. Give us a shout at 713-526-4444 and be sure to follow us on social at Center for HAS. This week's discussion ponders whether symptoms of pain and discomfort are signs that your body is betraying you, or could it be it's trying to talk to you? And now, please enjoy the show.
Hey y'all, how's it going?
Hi.
Good.
Hey. Thanks for coming together for our cosmic soup. And today we've got a topic that we want to talk about, and let's just see where we go. Let's kind of start free associating. Leila Scott, I love what you said about body talk. I wonder if because we as you're outgunned here. You got a lot of psychotherapists on our conversation today, so we want to hear from you certainly. We tend to frame things on the psyche side as opposed to the soma side. What do you mean when you say body talk? And then we'll talk about just kind of symptoms as they emerge in our offices.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just find myself working with patients and myself, because I'm a patient too, of course, on reframing how we relate to symptoms and discomforts or just downright pain in our bodies. The first place we tend to go, I think, as humans is a place of frustration or even anger at our bodies, because there's a sense of betrayal that's happening. Our interpretation of the sign or symptom is that our body is working against us instead of with us. And so reframing that into perhaps your body is not against you, but is actually trying to speak to you. I like to use the example of, if we were walking closer and closer to a fire and we just kept walking despite the increasing intensity of the sensation of heat, well, of course we're going to get desperately burnt, so I'm curious why we tend to not look at our own pain symptoms that way. I'm walking closer toward a fire. I need to redirect. I need to look at this. I need to pay attention to the signs around me and inside of me. So that's what I mean by that.
Yeah, what do y'all think about how this emerges psychologically? Like how do you frame a symptom, and how do you understand the symptoms that people bring in and are describing in their first few sessions?
I think bouncing off what Leila Scott said, certainly seeing symptoms as important information, and I think to your point, Leila Scott, I think where people get tripped up is that, if we're walking closer to a fire or it's something that's under our control, then we feel like, I can do something about it. But when things happen to our bodies, when people are depressed, when we have symptoms that we don't like, that feels beyond our control, that's when all we want to do is turn it off. Just turn off the pain. And in the sort of a Jungian way of looking at things is that the pain has very important information, in the same way that, if you had some sort of abdominal pain and then the doctor said, I'll just take a few ibuprofen, and you're like, well, something's going on in there. I could turn the pain off, but I think it's important to figure out what's going on. That's sort of a way of course, we want to alleviate a symptom, but to alleviate the symptom and not find out where it's coming from and not process that is just going to mean that the symptom will reoccur in another form.
Yes. And to me, the place that I go there is like the sadness and grief. I feel that we as humans are not taught how to be in our bodies. You know, just like what you said, it's like the instinct was completely removed from the patient when the doctor said, okay, well, take some ibuprofen. There was no curiosity. There was no investigation. There was no paying attention to, you know? So
Yeah.
that power, that intrinsic knowing and power is completely taken away through, you know, a course of growing up, the emotionally big feelings, physically big pain, you know, and put into somebody else's hands. And we've completely lost our way in terms of knowing how to follow the yellow brick road.
It seems weird to me because our sensory system is set up in that way, right? I mean, if I hear a bang in the other room, everything comes online and I want to go investigate. And so I'm curious, or I'm scared, or I do whatever I tend to do. But when it comes to self-reflection or introspection, or certainly being aware of our biology, we don't tend to have that kind of curiosity. And I mean, I think about trauma, you know, symptoms that people bring in. For example, I learned years ago about a woman who was sexually abused as a child. She ended up at a very young age, around 9 or 10, starting to drink alcohol. And by the time she was 15 or 16, was drinking about a fifth of vodka per day. And when I was in training, an analyst told me, I was blown away when an analyst said, and the alcohol probably saved her. And I thought that's fascinating and interesting, because then she followed up with, and the alcohol may kill her. And so the kind of the way our system works to kind of contend with these overwhelming experiences is we develop these adaptations to deal with the discomfort. And then that adaptation becomes something that actually needs to change, but we cling to it because it actually helped us. I mean, if I were overwhelmed as a kid and I withdrew because that's how I managed my emotions, and now I'm in, you know, my marriage or a friendship or whatever, and I tend to withdraw, and somebody's telling me don't do that, it's like, well, you're kidding me. I mean, that's my primary method of keeping safe. But then I experience that as patterns over and over and over and over again, and I finally come to the psychotherapist or wherever, and I say, shit, I had this pattern. It serves me, but it's not serving me. Let's work with that.
Yeah. I think in the absence of instruction and mentorship in terms of how to live in your body, how to have big feelings, physically or emotionally, we do tend to turn to these numbing techniques, or like you said, just retreat, walk away from it. Don't notice that the fire is getting hotter and hotter.
Chelsea, what were you going to say?
You're muted.
You can't hear you.
I thought you made a noise and I was being annoying, and now I'm the noise. I love the expectation side of that. I think that the way that our brain interprets sensory input has so much to do with the experiences that we've had before. I electrocuted myself once and I didn't realize what had happened, and my brain just made a story. I touched something and the shock went out the back of my shoulder, and it felt to me like something had hit me from behind. There was one other person in the house with me, and I was like, how dare you just come up behind me and hit me? Like, that was the first place my brain went. That is not at all what happened, but that was from my prior expectations. I've never been electrocuted before. I just assumed that I'd just been hit in the shoulder.
That's a really interesting point, Chelsea, about how our capacity to interpret the symptom is very important, and part of, I think, what I know you do this, Leila Scott, but definitely in psychotherapy, it's about checking out the level of interpretation that you have on that. I mean, is it moral? This is good or bad? You know, is it intellect? Do I tend to intellectualize, or we get into defense mechanisms, you know, at that point? But that's a really good point about like just the way you interpret your body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just our brain's so powerful to just make up whatever story it wants to make up based on what it's experienced. Like, it kind of makes me question everything that I think in a new way ever since then.
And we should, I think, question everything we think. I often tell people, you know, the mind is not necessarily your friend. You know, it's certainly a something we can use to guide us through, but it's not the part of you I think you trust, right?
It's doing its best, but it is not trustworthy at all. It is
Yeah.
constantly creating an illusion around us that makes us comfortable. And that goes back to the alcohol. Like, we just have to make ourselves comfortable first before we can even think of dealing with anything.
Yeah, I love that saying, where, you know, the habits or the patterns that originally served you usually end up being your, you know,
Yeah, our coping mechanisms can kill us.
This brings up a really good point of when a symptom shows up. I think one of the first things that I'm trying to envision with a patient is how we actually align with that symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And say, how to your point, Leila Scott, how does this serve you? What is this doing? When does it show up? How does it show up? Like, if somebody's coming in and they are drinking alcohol, for example, and you just say, well, you know, don't drink, you know, they're not coming back, and they're, you know, and probably they're going to go get drunk just because that was such an invalidating experience. And so to actually align with, you know, alcohol, you know, what does that do? How does it work? Let's learn it. Let's get to know the topography of your experience when it comes to this kind of tendency towards alcohol.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing with holistic medicine. People have a problem in their body, but they're worried if they come for help, we're going to be like, you need to go on a diet and stop eating all the things that you love eating. And you need to only drink water, even though you love that cup of coffee in the morning. Your joy is a part of your health. And it's learning how to balance all of these things is what holistic medicine is so great about, and why we need to pay attention more to our mind and the signals that it's interpreting. Because if the thing that's holding us back from being healthy is just worried that you're going to take this food away from me, like, why is this particular food so important to you in the first place? Like, that's the question.
Yeah.
Right, because I think it symbolizes something, you know. When somebody's who's bringing up their drinking to me in session, it's like, okay, well, are you okay with the amount of alcohol you drink? It's not a judgment, right,
Yeah.
that I'm here to make. It's just me probing a little bit about what their relationship is with that substance, whether it's alcohol or Cheetos or pie or coffee. You know, are you okay with it? Are you the one choosing that item, or is that item choosing you?
And how is it interfering with your goals? That's where I think people start having problems. Is they're like, this thing fixes this one problem, it's creating a whole new problem, and now it feels out of my control.
Exactly.
Matt, I'm curious about, you know, maybe I think you were about to say something, but I was also about to jump in.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say how I think it's not even just the overt behaviors, right? It's about how the unconscious is presenting itself in and how this body work is informing you, right? I mean, I know Leila Scott and I have talked a lot about like lack of sleep and what that means, right? Is it just that, oh, you just need some melatonin and you'll fall asleep? Or is it that you're up all night thinking about things that make you anxious? Are you stimulating your brain too much? Are you doing things that are now unconsciously presented? I know that happens a lot with a lot of the clients that I work who say that they're easily agitated and they're angry and they're resentful, when it's like, okay, well, let's think about how stress induces cortisol in your body and how that cortisol is affecting all of your livelihood, all of your decision making and thinking. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we also have to remember that, I think especially in that Western medicine sense, that we think that symptoms are separate from emotions, where they're really just kind of interwoven together and affecting each other on both ends, right? Sometimes physiologically first and then emotionally, or vice versa. The emotion comes in and then that symptoms presents.
Right. Gia, what about you?
Well, I mean, I've had conversations even with my clients now about whether they should eat that next chicken nugget and just eat chicken nuggets. Yeah, like even with my caseload now, a lot of kids are presenting with being diagnosed with ADHD. So it's kind of like that conscious choice because they are having digestive stuff going on. And sometimes they're resistant and all they want is are those chicken nuggets or PB&J or a can of soda or whatever else. And they're not really processing, hey, like how is what I'm putting in my body informing how I kind of proceed with the way I'm acting, or if I'm not acting on certain situations, and kind of being able to really process and reflect on maybe this plus this can equal to, you know, a better bowel system or a better being more mindful day to day with their interactions with their families or even for themselves. Sometimes they kind of shut down because they don't know what's going on with their bodies. And I was also thinking about on the other side of the aisle, some of my kids are enjoying feeling all of these feelings because that's something that they're in control of. So whether it be rebellious behavior or talking back or putting themselves in dangerous situations, yes, it's kind of a component of, so to speak, their body kind of informing those actions, but it's also on the other side of the aisle where it's like, hey, this is enjoyable and this is both what my body and mind are informing me. So I'm just going to keep doing it because it's a way of sustaining myself. So it's really definitely having us as professionals kind of come in and tend to those areas so that we can kind of create that broader perspective for them of like, hey, like, you know, maybe this isn't so great for your body. Maybe we can be healthier. Maybe we can do something where you don't feel like crap half the time. And a lot of kids I've seen are open to that. It's just more of, you know, having a third person give an outside view of like, yo, like, this is messed up. Gotta do something about it.
Sounds to you like a lot of those kids are seeking the feeling of being alive, you know, in a world that you know, sitting in a school desk all day, like, ugh, that doesn't feel like life to a child, you know. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, having the guidance to walk them through, this is why you're choosing these behaviors. This is why you're choosing these foods. You're seeking a sensation to remind you that you're alive, and then guiding them to other choices that are even more effective at making them feel alive. But to go back to the alcohol example, you know, they're called spirits for a reason. You know, people are seeking another level of consciousness or awareness or connection, but without realizing that they are necessarily.
But I think sort of on something that Chelsea said, but people are always interpreting that on their own past experiences and their family of origin and all of that. And part of what we all do is helping people have the imagination of a different kind of response. Because of course, you know, if you've never been electrocuted, that's not gonna be the first thing that comes into your mind. First thing that comes into your mind is based on your previous experience. And so if people are coming in and they're only seeing two black or white options, part of what we do is not exactly teaching, but helping them open up their imagination to new possibilities and new ways of interpreting things. You know, this doesn't necessarily mean that. It could mean something very different, or you could respond to it in a different way.
I think that brings up that Einstein quote about you can't solve a problem on the same level of consciousness on which it was created. And that like, so when you go to the psychotherapist or you go to the physician, you know, of course you just want to end your suffering. Like, this is uncomfortable, I don't like it, help me make it stop. And then the frustrating piece is that, well, we're re-envisioning and kind of expanding your capacity to, I like your, you know, this framework, Rodney, to imagine what's happening. And back to Chelsea, your interpretation of what's going on.
Yeah, so when I turned around and nobody was behind me, my brain went, ghost.
I would go, for sure.
It wasn't clearly now.
All right, you know, we've got to close it out for our you know, lightning bolt you know, round here. Any other thoughts in closing before we shut it down for the day?
I think we should all look left and right and up and down like the Brady Bunch.
The brain.
Yeah.
I don't know where I am.
I just got a crick in my neck. I got a symptom now. I'm gonna ask my wife to fix it. Hey, you guys, good to see you. It's fun to cut this up with you and analyze these things. And it's always wonderful to see your faces, even from afar. All right, we'll close it out today, y'all.